Who loves to eat fish? Couple? Good. Now, for those of you who like to eat fish, do you know where that fish comes from or where it's harvested? May not know, but knowing where your food source comes from is very critical to any dietary concerns that you may have. And according to the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, about 84% of all seafood is imported some way, somehow. I've been a fisherman since I've been a little kid with my family, and I've also done some research to find out where fish is located and what they like to feed on. Knowing the acronym BAIL, spelled B-A-I-L, will tell you critical information about where a fish comes from, what they like to feed on, and how you can harvest it. Now, next time you're at a restaurant, you may give it to some thought at where the fish came from and how it came from the water to your table. Now, the Midwesterners like to eat two types of fish, which I'll be talking about a little bit today, is panfish and walleye that associate with the acronym BAIL. Now, with panfish, the first letter is B. That stands for bait. Now, the two types of bait that panfish like to feed on are live and artificial. Types of live bait are worms, maggots, or types of insects, but sometimes you might not have access to that. You might have some plastic, which could imitate the live bait, which this plastic here imitates some of the maggots. So those are two types of bait that panfish like to feed on. The second letter for BAIL is appropriate presentation, A. Now there's two types of presentation that panfish will normally get harvested on. It's jigging and bobber fishing. So jigging, it associates with the motion of moving your pole up and down, so that gives it a little motion for the bait to move in the water for the fish to come at it. However, there's also bobber fishing where you can set a depth to where the fish are in some shallower areas. And then the third letter is instruments, type of instruments you will need in order to catch these panfish. First off, you're going to need a pole, as shown here, and then some line associated with it. And since you're dealing with a small type of fish, 2 to 4 pound test will fit perfect. Also, you will need some types of jigs, hooks, bobbers if you need them, and some sinkers if you need some more weight in order to cast out your line. So those are some items that you will need in order to catch panfish. Now, the fourth letter is L, and that stands for location. And according to the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, the location for panfish are typically in weeds, rocks, or any type of shaded area underneath a pier or dock that might be around in a lake or a stream. And those are where panfish like to hang out the most, is mainly in shallower areas, but they can also be in deeper areas where there is some weeds or structure. So for panfish, the type of bait needed is artificial or live, and then you have appropriate presentation, which is jigging and bobber fishing. Then you have the type of instruments needed, a pole, bobbers, hooks, sinkers, and some line. And then the location where they're at are any type of structure, shallow areas, shaded regions are some typical spots where you might find some panfish. The next type of fish is the walleye. The walleye is going to have similar attributes as the panfish, but a couple different factors. With the bait used for walleye, you're also going to have artificial and live bait. But according to the Wisconsin DNR, that walleye like to feed on minnows, leashes, and night crawlers mostly. And so that's the type of live bait. The type of artificial bait can be plastic minnow that represents the live minnow. Otherwise, then you can have a lure, which is a plastic with some hooks on it. So that's sort of the artificial bait that you can have for catching walleye. The second letter is appropriate presentation. Now, with appropriate presentation, walleye like to bite when you have a jigging action, casting action, or trolling action. Casting and trolling actions are very similar. Casting is where you're standing still and you're casting your lure and it can come in towards you where you can catch the fish. Trolling is where you're in a dynamic setting where you're in a boat and you just let the lure out there and then you drag it across the water. Otherwise, then there's jigging, where you can use a jig or a jig and wrap, where it is that same up and down motion that gives a dynamic feel for the fish to come at and get, and you can use that with live or artificial bait. Now the third letter for bail is instruments. The type of instruments needed is very similar to panfish, except you're going to need a little bit heavier pound test. 6 to 8 is preferred, and then a pole as well, and then your lure, jigs or jig and wrap. And a jig and wrap is a lure and a jig put together. It gives it a little different presentation for the fish to come after. And the fourth letter in bail for walleye is location. Location is everything for walleye, and they like to be around rocks, weed edges, or any type of shallow environment, especially in the nighttime, because they can't see as well, so they have to go into the shallower areas. Knowing where fish comes from is very critical to any dietary concerns that you may have, and it's all understood with the acronym BAIL. Some of you may not have the fishing experience or may not know where fish come from, but providing you the information with the acronym BAIL, standing for bait, appropriate presentation, instruments, and the location where they're at, you'll be able to know next time when you're at a restaurant or a fish fry where the fish came from.